for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Japan welcomes the adoption of the resolution on the protection of humanitarian and UN and associated personnel, which we co-sponsored. Japan deeply appreciates Switzerland's leadership in drafting the resolution. As we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Protection of Civilians agenda here at the Security Council, as well as the 75th anniversary of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, Japan believes this resolution is a vital step towards securing the safety of those who daily risk their lives to help others in conflict zones for high cause. We really need to protect them, as other members of the Council already stated today. As a strong advocate for human security, Japan continues to promote the protection of civilians, including humanitarian and UN and associated personnel, together with the member states, the UN member states, the UN system, and the civil society organizations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Humanitarian personnel. Their assistance to civilians in situations of conflict often makes the difference between life and death. Regrettably, and as is laid bare in the recent Secretary General report on the protection of civilians, these personnel are now the victims of increasingly frequent attacks. This morning, the permanent representative of Switzerland presented a resolution, and that was decisive and made an unequivocal statement on this matter. Consequently, my delegation decided to vote in favor of and co-sponsor the draft resolution tabled by Switzerland. We thank this delegation for their leadership and openness to incorporating the contributions made by members. The protection of humanitarian personnel.
We must strive to realize the dignity where the safety and dignity of every human being is wrapped in armed conflict. The adoption of this resolution is a step in this direction.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Let me join colleagues in thanking Switzerland for their work to take forward this really important resolution and the collaborative way in which they did it. On behalf of the United Kingdom, I would also like to take the opportunity today to pay tribute to all UN humanitarian personnel for their vital work. The UK strongly supports the purposes of this resolution. UN and humanitarian workers operate worldwide in extremely difficult and often dangerous conditions. It is right that we, as a Council, have today affirmed the protections that they need and deserve. Crucially, the resolution is clear that parties to armed conflicts have obligations to protect local and national aid workers, as well as UN and international humanitarian personnel. We call on all Member States to facilitate their work and support their efforts. Local and national aid workers are essential in efforts to reach the most vulnerable. they often risk their own lives to help save the lives of others. We welcome the strong language reaffirming the importance of international humanitarian law, as well as the need to focus on protection from the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence. And finally, we welcome the resolution's focus on addressing misinformation and disinformation and encourage further steps to counter this increasing threat to UN and humanitarian staff. We look forward to seeing the recommendations in the Secretary-General's report and remain committed to taking forward this important agenda. Thank you.
Thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Russian Federation abstained during the vote on the draft resolution submitted by the Swiss delegation on the protection of humanitarian personnel. The Russian Federation has embraced a consistent position on issues related to ensuring the safety and security of humanitarian workers and United Nations personnel. We, from the very outset, proactively and constructively participated in the negotiations process, and we presented our principled concerns in a timely way. We are grateful to the Swiss penholders of the dossier for the efforts that they undertook to seek consensus and taking into account a number of our proposals. At the same time, we do regret the fact that due to pressure from a number of Western delegations, a number of remarks were left on the margins, remarks related to holding to account perpetrators of violations of IHL in connection with a certain international court and tribunal, proposed parameters for ensuring humanitarian access, as well as the hackneyed gender language. Furthermore, attempts to push through initiatives that clearly do not enjoy universal support are no longer surprising to us at all. President, amid an increase in the number of conflicts in many parts of the world, the delivery of humanitarian assistance remains one of the most dangerous forms of activity. We pay tribute to the courage and the selflessness of the staff of international humanitarian agencies. Under complicated circumstances, they continue to pursue the critical objective of preventing suffering of civilians. Clearly, despite the measures undertaken by the international community, respect for obligations for the protection of humanitarian personnel continues to leave a lot to be desired. We are gravely concerned at the increase in the number of dead and wounded humanitarian workers over the past year. In the Gaza Strip alone, 262 humanitarian workers have been reported to have died. Of them, 193 people are UN staff, primarily UNRWA personnel. In this connection, we wish to draw attention to the hypocritical statement of the U.S. representative. Here at the United Nations Security Council, he laments the casualties, the civilian and humanitarian personnel casualties. However, in reality, Washington has been delivering unprecedented quantities of weapons to both Kiev and West Jerusalem. If the United States of America stops doing this, then there will be far fewer casualties, and perhaps there will be no casualties at all. President, ensuring safety and security of humanitarian personnel constitutes a paramount priority, the cornerstone for the establishment of effective mechanisms in the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Amid intense hostilities, the delivery of assistance to those in need is fraught with the highest risks to lives and health of humanitarian personnel. There's a need to spare no effort to prevent attacks and to prevent acts of violence against these brave individuals. However, in many cases, this can only be achieved in one way. That is, through an immediate ceasefire and by seeking political diplomatic solutions. And this is something which we repeatedly called for and continue to call for in this council vis-à-vis members. Instances of use of violence and targeting violence against humanitarian personnel need to be thoroughly investigated, and perpetrators need to be held to account. At the same time, we believe that humanitarian organizations need to demonstrate maximum responsibility on matters related to the protection of their personnel. personnel. A priority in their activities needs to be stringent compliance with what is enshrined in in General Assembly resolutions. I refer to the guiding principles for the delivery of humanitarian assistance: respect for national legislation, traditions and customs of host states, close cooperation with local governing bodies, also indisputably play an important role in mitigating risks to safety and security of humanitarian personnel. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, Sierra Leone commends Switzerland for the leadership, successful negotiation, and adoption of Resolution 2730/2024 on the protection of humanitarian and United Nations and associated personnel and their premises and assets. We also commend the Security Council for demonstrating unity on this important issue, and Sierra Leone is pleased to be a co-sponsor of the resolution. As we commemorate the 25th anniversary of the protection of civilians on the agenda of the Security Council and the 75th anniversary of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, this resolution reaffirms the Council's commitment to international humanitarian law amid the contemporary political and security challenges. It also reinforces Council's strong condemnation of violence against humanitarian workers in a similar vein as Resolutions 1502 and 2175/2014 of the Council. The Secretary General's 2024 report on the protection of civilians identifies attacks against humanitarian workers as a major impediment to effective humanitarian support in conflict situations in 2023. The number of aid workers killed in 2023 more than doubled from 118 in 2022 to 261 in 2023, with an additional 278 aid workers reportedly kidnapped and 196 wounded worldwide. It is acceptable that this Council has passed 10 resolutions in total, urging states to ensure accountability for unlawful killings of aid workers to date, and they have continued with little consequences. This resolution sends a strong message of solidarity to humanitarian workers worldwide. My delegation urges this Council to remain seized of the gaps and challenges faced by humanitarian workers, including challenges to access justice when they're the victim of attacks, and the need for improved security risk management strategies to enhance the protection of humanitarian workers in armed conflict. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to begin my statement by paying tribute to all humanitarian aid workers, especially those who have sacrificed their life in service of humanity. I would also like to thank the delegation of Switzerland for its excellent work in facilitating the negotiations process on this very timely and relevant resolution. May I equally thank the delegation of China and Brazil for being at the inception of this crucial initiative, which proved indeed its relevance in the current aggression of the Israeli occupying forces in Gaza. Since the start of the negotiations process, Algeria had actively engaged in good faith and in a very constructive manner. And we thank the delegation of Switzerland for their openness and collaborative approach and for accommodating some of our proposals. This final draft was balanced and reflects a number of our priorities, and we were glad to sponsor it. This outcome is a clear message for the Council to the humanitarian community. Your work is highly appreciated and valued, and you deserve protection in accordance with international humanitarian law, which all parties to conflict should respect. If not, operative paragraph 2 in the just adopted resolution is clear. I quote, "It calls upon all states and parties to armed conflict to respect and to ensure respect for applicable international humanitarian laws in all circumstances. It is our responsibility as the international community, and in particular this very Security Council, to ensure that the international humanitarian law is respected by all parties. Accountability and zero impunity are key words. We look forward to the Secretary General recommendation on measures to ensure accountability and enhance the protection of humanitarian personnel and United Nations and associated personnel, including national and locally recruited workers and their premises and their assets. Mr. President, the adoption of this resolution is an occasion to remember the suffering of civilian and humanitarian personnel, in particular, those who are locally recruited in conflict zones. Unfortunately, parties to conflict tend to ignore international humanitarian law and the rules of the law of war. All the crimes, all the violations mentioned in this resolution we have just adopted, yes, all of them are committed by the Israeli occupying forces. I will highlight a few. First, indiscriminate use of explosive devices. Nearly 36,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza so far. 20% of them are women, 8% elderly persons, and 32% are children. If this is not indiscriminate bombardment, if it is not indiscriminate killing, I'm wondering what is this called. Second, unlawful denial of humanitarian access and depriving civilians of objects indispensable to their survival. Between the 10th and the 16th of this month, only 5 aid trucks, I repeat, only 5 aid trucks were allowed access to Gaza, compared to the 500 before October the 7th. With 1.1 million people facing catastrophic levels of food insecurity and starvation. Third, killing of personnel dealing with humanitarian activities. At least 262 262 aid workers have so far been killed in Gaza, making this aggression the deadliest conflict for humanitarian personnel in modern history. Fourth, disinformation and incitement to violence against humanitarian personnel, which reached its peak with the campaign against UNRWA. We have seen the result: burning of the UNRWA headquarters in Al-Quds and cruel targeting of its personnel and all humanitarian trying to help the hopeless Palestinians. This violation must be investigated by an independent and international inquiry committee to establish fact and to end impunity and to prosecute those who are responsible for these heinous crimes. Before concluding, I would like to reaffirm that the ICG orders are legally binding and that the occupying Israeli power should abide by the order issued today. The order issued today. The occupying power must immediately halt its military offensive in Rafah. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Mozambique. Distinguished members of the Council, I wish to begin by expressing our sincere gratitude to the delegation of Switzerland for the excellent work that led to the tabling of the resolution we have just adopted, a resolution that enjoys the full co-sponsorship of Mozambique. During the meetings in this chamber, excuse me, we have consistently defended the obligation of the parties in conflict to respect international law, including and in particular international humanitarian law and international human rights law. As emphasized during our open debate on Tuesday, 21st May, it is imperative to protect civilians, humanitarian workers, and UN aid workers in armed conflicts. We therefore believe that it is crucial to safeguard the lives of humanitarian and UN personnel, including national and locally recruited staff who operate in dangerous conditions and risking their lives to provide essential services to the needy people. On the basis of the above, we have voted in favor of this resolution as a reaffirmation of our strong commitment to addressing the critical need to protect those people who provide humanitarian aid and support. This resolution is also a recognition of the mounting threats and violence faced by humanitarian workers and UN personnel. As a matter of fact, the alarming rise in attacks, including those involved in landmines and improvised explosive devices, highlights the urgent need for enhanced protective measures. By voting in favor of this resolution, we also reaffirm our commitment to the safety and well-being of these personnel, which are essential for the successful delivery of humanitarian aid and the maintenance and their contribution to the maintenance of international peace and security. This resolution constitutes a comprehensive and a robust framework that addresses the myriad of challenges faced by humanitarian personnel and the United Nations staff in conflict zones. This is the reason why Mozambique strongly supports its adoption. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Security Council. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.